And this is your EFC, your expected family contribution, 0. Your future Swarthmore bill, 0. Your future refund, I don't even understand why he's getting a refund, but I'm not here to argue about it. So this is what a beautiful letter looks like. You do the math and you get 0. Hi everybody, I'm Alyssa the College Expert, and I'm here today to talk to you about how to break down a financial aid letter. So there's a couple of terms that we should go over before we get started. First one is EFC, or expected family contribution. When you fill out the FAFSA, which is the federal government's understanding of your finances, they come up with this number, which is the number that they think you can afford to pay based on the calculations they've done. So for instance, if your family makes $400,000, you are expected to pay more than if your family makes $50,000, right? And that makes sense. So the EFC is just the term, the word that they have for that thing. Next thing we should talk about are loans. So there are 2 kinds of loans that you want to know about from the federal government. One is subsidized, the other is unsubsidized. Subsidized loans do not accrue interest until 6 to 9 months after you graduate. So that means if you take out the loan on day 1, you don't accrue any interest on it. It is an interest-free loan until 6 to 9 months after you graduate. So if you paid it off the day that you graduated college, you would have no interest on that loan. Pretty cool. Not huge loans, but like great for what they are. Then there's unsubsidized loans. These are also from the federal government, and these do start accruing interest immediately. Loans from the federal government are generally a significantly safer bet than any other loan that you can get. Most college access people, there's a certain amount of money that they will encourage you to take out in loans and then stop. That's the loan cap. So the loan cap that we generally talk about is $5,500. And generally your subsidized and unsubsidized loans will add to $5,500. So those are loans that it's okay to say yes to, because we know the interest rate is low, and we know that these loans are generally trustworthy because they're coming from the federal government. The other loans, we have to figure out. You've said yes to your subsidized and unsubsidized loans, that's your $5,500, and that chunk is like dealt with. And let's say you need other money to go to college. The thing that you want to make sure that you do is know your interest rate. A lot of times you'll sign up for a loan and you aren't completely cognizant, aren't completely aware of how much it's going to cost you over the long run. You can figure out how much you will pay. Just use an interest calculator, figure out when the interest on the loan is compounded, and figure out how much that loan is going to cost you. Because if you look at the number and you're like, wow, I'm going to pay almost twice the value of this loan in order to borrow this money, is it really worth it? Obviously, that's a decision that you have to make, but the only thing that I can tell you is please compute the value of the interest and understand how much you are paying total. Okay, so let's get to some financial aid letters. This first financial aid letter I want to show you is from a student that I had a couple years ago. She went to Union College, which is on the trimester system. The financial aid letter is laid out in terms of 3 semesters as opposed to 2. No big deal. So when you look through Gabby's financial aid letter, you'll see up at the top that we have tuition, fees, room and board. So that is everything that it will cost. They also give her a book allowance and a travel allowance, which is pretty cool. This particular student I know lives in Florida, and $1,000 travel allowance to and from Schenectady, New York, probably not gonna cut it. So those are things that you want to keep in mind. Just because this is the amount of money that the college has allotted you doesn't mean that that's the actual amount that you're gonna need. And remember, you're definitely gonna have to go home once a year unless you're planning to live on campus all summer. And most people go home over the holiday break, so that has to last at least twice. A lot of people wanna go home over Thanksgiving, or maybe you wanna go home for spring break or fall break. So keep all of those things in mind when you're looking at this letter and the way that it's laid out. Then the next column below, you'll see institutional aid. So this is all the money that's coming from the college. So you see that this student has a presidential scholarship, a book allowance, a union scholarship, and then some other scholarship that's named after these people who clearly endowed it. So all of that money, anything that says scholarship or grant, that is free money, that's money you don't have to pay back, that's forgiven, we're done. Free money is good money, scholarship money and grant money is good money. Then we have federal aid. And so here you see Pell Grant. Pell Grants traditionally go to students whose families are making not very much money. So if you are a Pell Grant recipient, you often have an expected family contribution of 0. And then you see all these other federal grants. Remember, anything that says grant doesn't have to get paid back. And then we get to the subsidized loan. She's definitely gonna say yes to this. You can see that this adds up to $3,500. And then we see work study. Ooh, work study is great. But here's what you need to know. So in order to get work study, you have to take an on-campus job and you have to actually work those hours. So for instance, when I was in graduate school, I worked in the ensemble office photocopying orchestra parts. I don't remember what my work study allotment was, but let's say it was $1,000 a semester. So that means that I would have to work to actually earn that $1,000. The ensemble office would pay me, and then if I got to the point where I was exceeding $1,000, I might still be able to work, but that's at the discretion of the place that I was working. So when I surpassed $1,000, the ensemble office was like, well, we still need more stuff photocopied, so yes, Alyssa, we'll continue paying you. But they didn't have to. The amount that was guaranteed to me was the $1,000. And they also could have said, okay, Alyssa, you've hit the limit of your work study, you can't work anymore because we don't have any more money to pay you. Work study is like a thing that you have to remember that you have to actually do. That money isn't actually there, and the money doesn't come until you've earned it. So you don't get that money at the beginning of the semester. That money isn't forgiven from your tuition. It's just the opportunity to earn money while you're there. So one thing that I want to point out to you about this award letter, if you look at it, it tells you the cost of attendance, $65,000, and it tells you the award total, $64,000. But nowhere on this letter do they do the math and say, you will owe $1,000 per year. I don't know why, but they don't. So this is the kind of crazy thing about these letters, that you have to be aware that you're still going to have to do some math on them. Let's look at the next one. So this one is for Alfred University, which is a school in upstate New York. So first, they're very clear with the estimated cost of attendance, and they include housing. That's the thing I always want to check for. Do they tell me tuition and housing? Because you'll see some letters do not include housing, and if you're planning to live on campus, obviously you need to take that money into account also. Then underneath, they tell him how much grant and scholarship money he'll get to help pay for college. That's great. Remember, grants and scholarships, that's free money. Good. We like that. And then they subtract those two. They give us the net costs. Great. But then they give us the loan options. And you'll see that the loan option and the work study are set up in a completely different way from Gabby's letter. So Gabby's letter, you could see that her work study and her loans were kind of taken out of her cost of attendance. This letter doesn't do that. So you have to understand that that's actually what's happening. You can see that this student has an expected family contribution of 0 down at the bottom. And so you can see also that his two loan options, subsidized and direct unsubsidized, those two add to $5,500. And that's the cap that we talked about. That is the amount of money that it's okay to say yes to in terms of a loan. And more than that, we want to be really careful. And then you see that they've allocated him $2,000 in work study. So now it is incumbent upon him to do the math, him and his family, to figure out that for the $19,000 that he's going to have to pay, he has $2,000 in work study and $5,500 in loans. Oh, okay. So his expected family contribution is actually only $12,000. But nowhere on this letter do they do that math for you. Even though they tell you that the expected family contribution is 0, they know that, but they also can't give him enough money to meet the actual need that he has. So he knows, after he's done the math on this letter, that he has to find $12,000 a year if he wants to go to Alfred. Okay, let's look at the next letter. This is for Mercy College, also for Miguel. And if you look at the top, they tell you all of the scholarships and grants. That's amazing. So he got all of that money. And then on the right side, you see that they've given him the tuition and fees, $20,000, and they subtracted those things. So they have the $20,000, and then they subtracted the grant and scholarship, and they say, hey, you're only going to have to pay $1,400. But you probably remember what I said before. We also have to make sure that room and board is factored in. And when I look at the math that they did on the side, I realize that they actually didn't factor in the cost of room and board, which is half again as much as the tuition and fees. So really, they've subtracted $20,000 and $18,900, and they said, oh, $1,400 is the change, but that doesn't include him actually living there, which he's going to have to do because Dobbs Ferry is too far from his house. He has to live there. Really, he's going to owe $12,000, and they didn't add that up for him anywhere. Then you go down to where they have the loans, and so again, this is set up differently from Gabby's letter. When you look at Gabby's letter, the school assumes that you'll take those loans, and it says, this is how much everything will cost if you accept these loans. Miguel's two letters laid out the loans as an option, but they sort of didn't presume that you would take those loans. So here again, same thing is happening. They are laying out the loans as an option. So you see the direct and unsubsidized loan, the $5,500. We're used to seeing that. We remember the $5,500 is the loan cap, right? So those are loans we can say yes to. And they're willing to give him $3,000 in work study. Okay, cool. So now I add that up, $5,500 and $3,000, that gives me $8,500. And so I subtract that from the $12,000 that I figured out before, which is his room and board, tuition and fees, minus all of the grant and scholarship money that he got. And what I figure out here is that he will have to pay $4,200 a year. Oops, I was about to make a big mistake when I recorded that video. I missed the part of the letter on the side where they talk about how much it's going to cost to commute to either Dobbs Ferry or Manhattan. And so if you look really carefully, you find out that the number that they quoted up at the top isn't even the actual room and board number. That's housing and meals if you commute from home. So the actual room and board number is, let me look really closely, $13,000 for Dobbs Ferry and $18,000 for Manhattan. So that price isn't even quoted on the letter. So when he adds up the entire cost, the whole thing totals $19,704 when you subtract out the financial aid and the loans that he's going to get. So when you calculate in the room and board that he's going to have to pay if he wants to live on campus in Dobbs Ferry, that's another $13.8 that he now has to account for, bringing his total to $19,704 plus the $1,400 up at the top. So his final cost is $20,474. And then when you go down and figure out how much he will be able to subtract when he takes the $5,500 in loans and the $3,000 in work study, that will decrease his total cost to $11,974. Let me just double check. Yep, that's right. And so that's a little crazy, right? Think how long I had to look at this letter. I, a person who does this professionally, and even I missed this very specific thing. So what does that tell you? You have to be super vigilant when you're looking at these financial aid letters to make sure that you're really understanding everything that they're saying. Double check, bring it to somebody that you know, bring it to the college counselor, and just ask them to look at it and make sure that there's nothing you've forgotten or misunderstood. So this letter is an example of what I call a perfect letter. This child got into a school, he has an expected family contribution of 0, and he got into a school that meets 100% of need, and it's a no-loan school. This is not that common, so when you see a letter like this, you are just like, oh my God, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. So if you look here up at the top, it shows you all of his expenses. So it gives him direct cost is tuition and fees and room and meal plan, right? And so they lay all of that out, and they're like not hiding the ball. They're like, hey, that's $70,000. And then they give him books and supplies and personal expenses, and they add all of that together to get a total cost of attendance. Then, if you look at his financial aid, scholarships and grants, remember that's money he doesn't have to pay back. This is a no-loan school. That means that they meet 100% of his need without any loans. Mind blown. Then you see his work study money, $2,100. We talked about work study already. You know what that is. And so if you look at his financial aid decision and his cost of attendance, you see that those numbers are the same, right? That's beautiful. That's what you want. And then down at the bottom, it says family and student contribution. This is your EFC, your expected family contribution, 0. Your future Swarthmore bill, 0. Your future refund. I don't even understand why he's getting a refund, but I'm not here to argue about it. I'm just thanking whatever, the universe, that this is happening for him. So this is what a beautiful letter looks like. You do the math and you get 0. That is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. The moral of this story is look carefully at the letters, apply common sense to them, and ask yourself, how much will I actually pay? And be prepared to do the math. So you want to make sure that you've taken into account tuition, room and board, and you have looked at all of the grant aid and all of the loans and all of the work study that you get. Those are really the pieces that you want to put together to figure out how much you're going to owe. Thanks to Central Scholarship for collaborating with us. I'm Alyssa the College Expert, coming to you from Socratic Summer Academy and the Yleana Leadership Foundation. For more college tips, check out the Central Scholarship website and Socratic Summer Academy's blog. Thanks for watching.